Okay, everyone, right, okay. One welcome, please, to Aaron, Tony, and Amaya, and this is Kitlet. Give us a round of applause. Thank you. Aaron, there you go. Thank you.
Unfortunately, we're going to start this presentation by being awfully pedantic and saying it's actually Kitlet. But I'm sorry, but the pun of the project somewhat goes out the window when it's referring to Kitlet. So, simply put, we may as well elaborate on where the name come from. Kitlet is a project that we decided where you could let out bits of your kit. So, hence the name Kitlet. The idea was fairly simple. Lots of musicians, creatives, artists, and the like, we all have rather expensive bits of kit. I have a pair of decks that are probably worth £1,000. They're also gathering a lot of dust. That's rather inefficient. I would quite like one weekend, potentially, to let out those decks, maybe for 50, 20 quid. I don't know, 20 quid a day, 50 quid a day. Let those out and instead borrow another person's bit of kit, maybe a synthesizer, maybe even a new guitar, who knows? And especially, this is precedent for filmmakers, where potentially you might be on shoot for a day or two, and you just need that boom mic for that one day or two. You don't need it for a very long period of time. So, slide. We decided to make an app that facilitated peer-to-peer lending between users based on their location for various bits of kit, whichever they wanted for the respective project. Now, the beauty of a peer-to-peer system would be that the market would actually drive the prices down for the users and stabilise at a fair point. So we wanted to sort of utilise free markets and also the peer-to-peer atmosphere, as well as location services and people being able to get the right bit of kit for the right job on the right day. And without further ado, I'm going to pass you over to Tony, who will demonstrate the app in action.
Hopefully. First time. Look at that. So we've already logged in here as my account, and given the fact that we're all quite technically literate in here, we can go into a little bit more of what's happening under the hood. So this is the discovery screen here with all the various expensive bits of equipment: a server rack, Fender Stratocaster, a Canon wide-angled lens, and given the fact that we use React Native, it meant we could reuse the components throughout our application and just make it a bit more efficient. And given the fact that we had such a short amount of time, that was probably a good idea. So that discovery card here, where you can see the Yamaha and the various different items for sale, is reused in various places, like the profile screen, the notification screen, the messages screen, and we've basically rendered it dynamically based on the props and the variables, if you like, that we have passed down to that component. And here's someone just actually requesting this Yamaha DX7. I don't know what that is, but it looks expensive. And you can filter, and you can do various other things as well. And here is to actually upload a new piece of a new item. So I'm not sure what's going to go on here, but something expensive, I imagine, again. And that's just contacting the Firebase local storage. The Firebase image hosting, sorry, for our 3D printer. And what's happening? Yeah, okay. We're still adding on the additional description here. And all of the fields do have to be entered in. I don't think it actually shows it in the video where if some of the fields are left out, it does give you a prompt every single time. An expensive bit of kit there, £676 a day, and there it is. It's been added onto the database there as well. And so here is another example of the component being reused, this time for the individual user. And here is an example of a patch request. So effectively what is going to be happening here is we are going to be editing some of the items. So Canon wide-angled lens will now be spelt correctly with some small changes to the description and also the cost as well. And then that'll be sent off and updated as soon as you press update item. And there it is, you've had a feedback there that that's gone through okay. And then we have our inbox system. Now, we would have really liked to, and we were very, very close to integrating a bidirectional messaging service through Socket.io. However, now currently we're on a inbox system, so we're going to send off, yes, it is ready for this weekend, to the person who has requested this bit of kit. And then if you were the owner of that bit of kit, or the person who had requested that bit of kit, you would then be told that you had a reply, and you would then be able to have a bit of communication through an inbox system, similar to an email, that communication would basically be opened up between those two parties. And I think we're pretty much good to go to the next slide. Yeah, there's requests as well. Yeah, I forgot about the requests. So you can see the incoming and outgoing requests from both parties, things that you had requested and things that had been requested from you as well. So the tech stack, there's various few things going on here. So we used Node.js, Express for the back end, which Umair will talk a little bit more about. We had React Native, which was a new technology that we kind of took on. We were familiar with React.js, however, React Native has a few different quirks and things that are slightly different, and Aaron will talk a little bit more about that. PostgreSQL, Firebase, Google Maps API, and we were using Expo as part of our IDE. However, we were also, towards the end of it, using Android Studio as well, just because we found it a little bit more easy to work with. It was less obstructive in some ways. And I'm going to pass over to Umair, I believe now, to talk more about the backend.
Okay, so yeah, for the backend, we decided to go with Express as our choice for backend. Reason being that the routing ability and configuration was just very efficient, and also same thing with connects as well. It just made the SQL queries very simple and a lot more efficient to be able to chain on all the different queries and be able to just make more complex queries more simple. Migration tables were also used because obviously you may need to make changes to schemas and make some alterations, so migration tables were very useful in that regard. Postgres was used as our database choice as well, because we also needed a relational one, because there are users who will be linked to items, who will be linked to requests. There's a lot of linking going on, so we needed a relational one in that regard. And also for hosting purposes, which we'll talk a bit about later as well in some of the challenges that we faced. As well, very much liked the error handling that you can do with Express. It's very efficient, neat. And yeah, we did full TDD on the API using Mocha, Chai, Supertest. We had quite a few tests as well, and I hope it was all passing. Yeah, no, it was. But yeah, that was the API. It works quite well for the app at the moment. And yeah, I'll pass over to Aaron now. We'll talk more about the front end.
Thank you. So our choices for tech on the front end was primarily driven by the actual app itself. If you imagine a typical user story, if you are to let out a bit of kit, one of the most imperative things you'll have is a good photo of that kit. Now, to save the user a bit of hassle and having to take a photo, then send it to a web app and the like, we decided to use a native app, so it's directly on the phone. The camera has a direct interface straight up to the cloud and straight up to our service. So the choice then seemed obvious to use React Native, as it was a technology that we're familiar with JavaScript, yet we're not familiar. So we're getting our feet wet on something new, whilst also being in the familiar territory of JavaScript. Another bonus for that was also that a good opportunity for React Native is you pretty much code it once, and bar a few tweaks, iOS and Android both interpret the code pretty much the same for the most part. There are a few minor differences. For instance, buttons, color and background color do different things depending on your OS, so you have to write a couple of ternary statements in there to facilitate that, but that's all fairly good to do. So that was our choice for React Native. It seemed more fitting to actually have it as a native app on the phone. Now, Firebase, people may think that seems like more of a back-end technology, and yes, it is a database and cloud storage solution. We opted to use it for our cloud storage for the primary reason that initially we toyed with the idea of storing our images buffered down in our actual database. Then the decision was made that actually that's going to cause a lot of network traffic for us that we maybe not have the funds to facilitate. The best thing would be to store a URL referencing said image. So we looked for a cloud solution, and Firebase, considering we were already using the Google Maps API, thought it'd be better to have it all on that one Google console, all on that one user account, and keep it all in one place. This does bring me onto the Google Maps API, which, as you saw, maps are present on quite a few of the pages, and the reason for that is kind of simple. The best visual representation of anywhere geographically is going to be a map. So we chose to display the map so a user could really get a sense of how far they were willing to travel. And sort of sister to the map, to the Google Maps API, is the Google Geocode API, which takes longitudes and latitudes and converts that to, for our purposes, the distance between the two locations. So when you initially start the app, it will say, we would like your location, please grant it, location permissions. Once those permissions are granted, that location is then sent to the server, to the geocode app with the location of the item that you're requesting on. And on our front end, we then make a calculation of how far away it is. That calculation can then be used to sort for distance. For example, I would be willing to travel 15 miles or so to get a good synth for the weekend if the price was right. I'd be less willing to travel 50 miles or so. So it's really good to help you actually make that purchase or lease, for a better word, decision. And in terms of testing the front end, we opted for Expo, which I don't know if you're familiar with, but it's a very handy way of running an app in real time, but being able to make dynamic changes to it and seeing those changes near instantly. With native devices, a lot of compiling often has to be done before the production builds and whatnot. And since our methodology was quite influenced by Agile, we wanted to keep things quick. We wanted to keep the ball rolling a lot and make a lot of changes and sort of really change the scope of the project as we see fit. So that could be really remedial things such as this button might look a bit better if it was slightly bigger. It could also be quite functional things like, should we render such a component in such a way? Actually, it might look better that way. And it provided us a really simple way of save the code, your phone flashes, it then refreshes the app in about 20 seconds, and then you have a brand new app build to play with, dynamically and easy, to save you having to keep compiling, breaking it down and building multiple builds of it. So that was our choice for Expo, and also pretty much wraps up why we chose our front-end tech. So I will pass you over to Umair, who's going to discuss some of the fun challenges we faced.
So some of the challenges that we ended up facing from back-end perspective was we decided initially to try go with SQLite, and that was all well and good for a while, but then as a team we kind of conferred and we kind of wanted it to be hosted on sites like Heroku and places like that, which SQLite isn't really compatible with. So this is where the flexibility of Express came in quite handy, because we could make that refactor quite easily and it didn't take up too much time. React navigation was also quite a thing for us to tackle, because although, like Aaron said, we were fairly familiar with React, there are some things about React Native that are quite different. So React navigation required us all to kind of pool our resources together to kind of and get around it and tackle that problem. Image file sizes was another one, because initially we were taking photos from our phones and then uploading those to Firebase. The only issue was that the file size of those images were like 4+ megabytes, and then when you're rendering those images all sequentially on your mobile device, it was causing the app to go really slow. So we had to kind of like, again, come together, figure out a workaround of how we can do it, and fortunately, actually Aaron came up with a way of just reducing the file size without compromising too much of the image, and then it just allowed us to make the app run a lot smoother than usual. And pass it over to Aaron.
And I suppose to summarise, we can talk about a few things that we learnt. Primarily, we learnt the importance of good teamwork, and there's a few good factors of good teamwork, and I suppose the ultimate one is to be positive and to communicate clearly, but in a nice, polite, well-reasoned way. So even if everyone is red in the face, very angry, steam coming out of our ears, and really livid, to keep polite, civil, and also calm was a very good way, very good, valuable lesson to learn. Now, it does sound like we were very angry at each other. It's not. We were more angry at the code not behaving how it did. But the best lesson we learned is the actual value of taking a break. The amount of days where it was 5-1 and all three of us were seething at our own individual tasks on the Kanban board. And we said, you know what, let's go to Sainsbury's, we'll get a £3 meal deal. And it's insane. The simple addition of crisps, a sandwich and a Pepsi Max cleared all of the brain fog, cleared all of the tension. We're back in the office at 2 o'clock, and believe it or not, most of those problems easily got resolved. So these lessons all seem to feed into each other. Communicating positively helped us work as a team and helped the cohesion. To be positive, sometimes you just need a sandwich and a break. So that all helped gel together, and in the end, we did really learn a lot about each other and ourselves, which is obviously nice. Things we do differently. There are perhaps a few tasks that we maybe, when we were designing our workflow, we said, oh, well, okay, this is one task. We've then tackled the task, and it turns out that that could have probably been broken up a bit more granular into 3 or 4 different subtasks, and we could have potentially worked on those individually. So efficiency may have been improved if we would have been a bit more granular in our planning. Additionally, there was one endpoint that I was expecting that I had not communicated clearly enough to Umair on the back end, so it was never built. And also, Umair had built an endpoint that was completely superfluous because I never needed it because I did all the sorting on the front end. So there was, if we would have been a bit more thorough in our discussion of back end into front end integration, we would have maybe saved a little bit more time and hassle. But apart from that, it was a very nice experience, and we'll open the floor to questions if that's all right with anyone.
Good. Cool. Good. Right, really, really well done.